again told us. The Prophet ﷺ narrated this entire incident and how it's going to go down. The people, when they realize that nothing is happening, they're just standing around, they're sweating, they don't know what's going on. You know how if you're in a group of people, people want something to happen, right? You want something to be going on if nothing's going on. If you're standing there, you're sweating, what's going on? Everyone's scared, confused. People are like, something should happen, right? And so the people begin to recognize that they can't do anything. So who can do something? And they go to the prophets, and one by one they go to them. Adam alayhi, he is afraid for himself because of what happened with the incident with the tree. Nuh alayhi is concerned because of his dua that he feels he made against his people rather than for the guidance of his people. Ibrahim alayhi is concerned because he told 3 lies in his life. Does anyone know what those 3 lies were? Yeah?
He lied about that he was sick and he couldn't go to the festival, so he left the
He lied about being sick, yes. What else? Anyone else? The second one was, he said that بَلْ فَعَلَهُ كَبِيرٌ. فَعَلَهُ كَبِيرٌ. The biggest idol is the one that destroyed all the other idols. When Ibrahim a.s. went and he broke all the idols, he left the hammer hanging around the biggest idol's neck. And when the people asked him, he said, no, the big one did it. Look, it's got the hammer. There's the evidence. And then finally the last one was when he stood in front of the tyrant king, he said to the king that his wife was his sister. The wife was his wife, Sarah, was his sister. And so that's what he's concerned about. These 3 small little things. For us, we think, man, it's no big deal. SubhanAllah, this is what prophets think about.
But this is not, this narration about these 3 lies is sort of controversial, so we should mention that also. There are some ulama who
there's explanations for that, right?
So we do not agree with this.
So we don't say they're necessarily lies. We say that, for example, in the first one he said, I'm sick, inni saqim, and that we say that he was sick of idol worship, right? Sick of idol worship. When it comes to the big one doing it, there's different interpretations as far as what exactly he was, on the top of my head I can't remember what exactly is for that one. But then for the third one with his sister, with his wife rather, she was his sister in Islam. So there's very simple ways to say that these weren't necessarily lies. But this is prophets, they always take greater consideration. They always think greater of their sins, or what they feel were their sins. Finally we go to Musa alayhi salam. Musa alayhi salam tells him to go to Isa alayhi salam. And finally, when they go to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he is the one who is given the ability to make intercession. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, on that day, the Prophet ﷺ will stand in front of him and he'll go into sajda and he'll just wait until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, "Irfa' ra'saka ya Muhammad," raise your head, Muhammad. And he will say, ask, you'll be given intercession. And the very first people to enter Jannah will be those who have no hisab. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from those people. No hisab meaning that we won't be questioned about anything. We just simply enter into Jannah, free pass. That is essentially, that's really all we have for part 2. Alright, part 3. Actually, can you get the cable for a minute, please? If you're connected. Alright, part 3. As Ahmad stood waiting to be called for his judgment, his efforts to keep himself composed were failing. He was a mess of nerves and fear, worrying about his sins and wondering what would happen to him. For a brief moment, he wondered about what was happening to his wife and his children, but those thoughts quickly vanished as he remembered his own problems. They would have to worry about themselves for now. Whatever was going to happen next, Ahmed was just happy to finally have some clothes on again, and that he wasn't thirsty anymore. He had been dying of thirst from the moment he had awoken, but it had been the least of his problems at the time. After the Prophet ﷺ's intercession, where the people had begun to move again, this time to a beautiful lake that was whiter than milk. When he got close, he didn't even think about it, what it was, before he grabbed one of what looked like 1 trillion little cups and dipped it into the lake. When he took a sip, he first thought that his brain had malfunctioned, because the strange white water was sweeter than the best honey he had ever had in his life. Having been a doctor in the world, a thought about diabetes crossed his mind, but he quickly passed when he remembered that the rules of the dunya didn't apply anymore. When he finished, the cup vanished from his hand, and somehow, despite having never been thirstier in his life, that little drink had completely quenched his thirst. Ahmed shook his head in disbelief before turning back to face everything else unfolding around him. Ahmed ibn Muhammad, a voice called out. Ahmed whirled around only to find himself in a new location with a giant scale in front of him. This must be the Mizan, he thought. It was at that moment that Ahmed realized that he wasn't alone, and as the reality of his situation dawned on him, he fell to the ground in prostration, weeping like a child separated from his mother. He was standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, about to be judged for his deeds. And that is the end of part 3. Now here, the first thing that happens with Ahmed is what? He thinks about his family, right? This thought about family is something Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually mentions as well in the Quran. يَوْمَ يَفِرُّ الْمَرْءُ مِنْ أَخِيهِ وَأُمِّهِ وَأَبِيهِ. On the day of judgment, that is the day when a man will run from his entire family. Other people are not going to be a consideration at that point. The people that we feel are the most beloved to us in this life will be people who we act as if they don't even exist in the akhirah. Got it? You're good. A little bit more. There it is. Once again, it'll be as if the matter is just too great for everybody. You're not going to be thinking about it. Right? It's like that car crash in a text message. What's important in that moment is not other people. What's important in that moment is just you. And that's why even the prophets, the most generous of people, will say, Nafsi, nafsi. Me. It's all about me. It's all about me. These are just some simple pictures.
Adjust it. Pull it down.
Oh. Yeah. Actually, I think that's more of a scale problem. It's no big deal. Next, the hawl, right? The water, the drink. What we talked about was that the hawl is essentially, some scholars, Sheikh bin Bay'ah, he made probably the simplest explanation of the difference between al-hawl, which is like the water basin, and al-kawthar, which is the river itself. He says that al-hawl is a water basin, it's a place where people will be given to drink that is fed from al-kawthar, right? So it's fed, the water of it comes from al-kawthar. No. Okay. So this is what we see here, that he goes, and the water, as the Prophet ﷺ told us, will be whiter than milk. It'll taste sweeter than honey. And these are things that don't generally come together, right? You don't think about that. That's not an attribute that combines normally. White stuff doesn't taste sweet in that sense usually. But here, not only will it taste in such a manner that it's so sweet, but it also will quench the thirst that we have for the rest of eternity. With one drink from a cup, and the Prophet ﷺ said the cups of that hawl will be like the stars in the sky. The number عَدَدُهُمْ كَالنُّجُومِ, like the stars in the sky. There will be so many cups, and everyone will be able to take and drink. And that drink will quench our thirst until the end of time. Well, actually for eternity, there's no end. Next was the Mizan. And this is, some scholars have differences as far as whether it's a physical thing or not. Wallahu a'lam, at the end of the day, Allah knows best. But what's important to understand is that our deeds will be measured. Right? And you can see that the ones who receive their book in their right hands, they're the ones who have succeeded. The ones who receive their book in their left hand or behind their back even, those are the ones who perhaps, Allahu a'lam, what Allah will do with them. But at the end of the day, what matters is that we balance our deeds where the good are greater than the evil. Now here's the interesting thing to understand. If you have 100,000 That's greater than 10,000, obviously, right? So 100,000 and 10,000. Which one's greater? 100,000, right? But here's the thing. The mizan is important because at the end of the day, deeds are not counted. Deeds will be weighed. And this is the key difference. Sincerity is what gives your good deeds weight. Whereas a lack of sincerity will make them light. Where you can have 1 billion good deeds with no sincerity and 10 evil sins, 10 bad deeds, and those 10 bad deeds will be heavier. Good deeds are weighed on the mizan, not counted. Sincerity, ikhlas, that is the key aspect to anything that we do. And that's what we always have to keep in mind. Whatever action it is, we always have to refresh and renew our intentions so that they are heavy on our scales. Not so that they are numerous, but heavy on our scales. Now obviously I have no desire to do anything where I speak for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, na'udhu billah. So I'm not getting into any of that. So part 4 is what we're continuing from. Ahmed sank to his knees as tears streamed down his face. The accounting was over, and he, by Allah's infinite grace and mercy, had passed. He was now amongst his fellow believers, and while there was a palpable sense of relief in the air, the sirat, the bridge, awaited, and everyone remained anxious. Ahmed watched in amazement as he saw the Prophet ﷺ encouraging people to cross a bridge so narrow, it was a wonder anyone was even able to go across it. As Ahmed looked on, he saw individuals step up to the edge, and in an instant they were to the other side, like a lightning bolt illuminating the sky for a split second. Wait a minute, Ahmed thought. Is that my wife? And are those my kids? Sure enough, he saw his wife stepping up to cross the sirat. Just as he started to run towards her, he watched as she disappeared in a flash and appeared on the other side. Spurred on by her courage, Ahmed stepped up and ran across the sirat himself, focusing only on being reunited with his wife and hopefully soon his kids. It was as strange a sensation as he ever felt while he ran, and he never dared look down, terrified of what he would see from the hellfire that waited below. A split second later, Ahmed blinked and realized he had made it across. Happiness filled his heart as it began to dawn on him that it was all over. And his wife's smiling face was all the invitation he needed to embrace her. He thought he would never let her go until he suddenly heard, "Abu Jan." A familiar group of voices filled Ahmed's ears as he turned around and saw all of his children running towards him. And while it didn't seem possible, he felt even happier than he had a moment ago as they all embraced him, tackling him to the plush, soft grass. As they laughed and cried together, grateful to be reunited in the akhirah, his son suddenly stopped and looked up. "Guys, look!" The beautiful gates of Jannah had opened and a voice called out, "Udkhuluha bisalam aminin." The beginning of the rest of their lives had started. And that's the end of part 4. Not too much to break down here. But what we see, number 1, the sirat. The Prophet ﷺ described it. There's various narrations, but it's subhanAllah, it's ajib. That it will be as thin as a hair. And these are things that we can't comprehend. Don't try to necessarily understand how and get into the physics and all that. The Prophet ﷺ said that it is as thin as a hair and sharp as a sword. And the people who cross it, there will be different types of people. Some people will cross it in the blink of an eye. Some people will cross it as if they're a lightning bolt, just flashing across. The Prophet ﷺ also mentioned that it would have hooks on the side. And these hooks, for those people who were slow to cross, would latch onto them and pull them, because underneath this sirat is the hellfire. So crossing it, you want to cross as fast as possible. Right? This is something we all aim to do. As I mentioned before, the order of things, as we don't have a clear-cut picture, and there is difference of opinion, this is the position that we're holding on to here, is that the Sirat is crossed and then people will be able to enter into Jannah. People will, of course, be reunited with their families. And when the gates of Jannah open, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this many times, that the words the angels will say to the believers are, "Udkhuluha bisalam aminin." Enter this place peacefully, safely. And when you think about what that means, this is much deeper than just, oh, here it is, no problem, enter in. This is not just one of those token, yeah, please come in. Well, this is congratulations, right? Think about what you had to go through to enter this place peacefully and safely. Never again do you have to worry about somebody asking you why it is you're putting your foot in the sink. Never again do you have to worry about someone saying, why do you wear that on your head? Never again do you have to even give consideration to the idea that someone doesn't understand why you have to pray. Forget about all those things. That's what this signifies. Udkhuluha bisalamin aminin. Enter it peacefully. And forget every concern and problem and worry you ever had before, because they'll never come back to you again. Ever again. Now, the beginning of the rest of our lives is eternity. And that's what these next two sections, inshallah, will focus on. Part 5. This had to be a dream, Ahmed thought. Despite having lived as a Muslim, having read the Quran, having heard over and over again how amazing Jannah was, what he was seeing at that moment just didn't seem like it could be real. He looked down as he walked along the paths of Jannah and realized that the pebbles he was kicking weren't just rocks, but pearls. And the ground he was kicking it onto was emanating, was giving off the beautiful scent of fresh saffron. Raising his gaze to the distance, he saw an enormous pavilion, gleaming a brilliant white. So enormous, in fact, that the word itself didn't do it justice. It didn't do it justice. He laughed as he realized that that was going to become a common theme as he moved forward. As he continued walking down the path, a row of trees appeared to him, and he saw the most luscious, plump, and delicious fruit hanging from the trees, the trunks of which were gleaming gold. How in the world was it possible for a tree to be made of gold? Guys, let's try one. I'll race you, Ahmed called out, leaving his family in the dust. Man, he was a lot faster than he remembered. He was even faster than his kids, but then he figured that made sense since he was the same age as them. How he had missed being 33, playing on the basketball court, living his life, doing whatever he wanted to do physically. His physical skills had diminished when he turned 40, but he was excited to get back to his old ways and maybe drop his old basketball buddies with a dunk. Reaching the tree, he quickly grabbed a fruit and sank his teeth right in. Wow! What was that taste? He'd never had anything like it before. As his family arrived at the tree, he took another bite, only to realize that the flavor was completely different than the first. But still, it was just as amazing. They hung around the tree for a while, enjoying and joking and just having fun. He couldn't remember the last time he had ever enjoyed himself this much. And a small pit of excitement grew in his gut as he realized this was only the beginning. Ahmed stood up and stretched. Guys, this has been a lot of fun, but I'm ready to relax now. Let's go find our houses. Our castles, his wife corrected. Ahmed laughed. Right, our castles. Come on, let's go. Ahmed and his wife began to walk along the path they had started on originally, leaving their kids to go off with their own significant others. As they carried on, a young boy, gleaming and glowing as if he was made of the most bright pearls, came rushing to their side. "You're here. Please allow me to escort you to your home, my masters. I am one of your many servants in this world." Ahmed couldn't help but smile as he nodded, and off they went. until suddenly they came upon what seemed like something out of a movie set. A giant castle that seemed to explode out of the horizon stood before them, built entirely out of what seemed to be gold, dotted with gems that glittered in the light of paradise. They came to the front door in awe, unable to take their eyes off the gigantic emerald that sat on the doors. The shining young servant smiled at them and then pushed open the doors. "Welcome to the last home you'll ever know." That's the end of part 5. So, some things to unpack. Number 1, the Prophet ﷺ is narrated to have told us in regards to the stones of Jannah. The pebbles of Jannah are not just pebbles. They are pearls. The grass has the scent of fresh saffron, as the Prophet ﷺ told us. And the pavilion that I mentioned is some place where the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that people would be with their families, and the distance between one corner to the other was to be so great that it's as if you could imagine that you're in one state and the person is in another state. That's the distance. These are just places where people can spend time and hang out with one another. As far as the trees, the Prophet ﷺ said that the trees of Jannah are made of gold. And see, again, you don't have to worry about the science of that. You don't have to worry about those things in Jannah. These things aren't a consideration. The fruit, as the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, this is from Surah Al-Baqarah directly. وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ أَنَّ لَهُمْ جَنَّاتٍ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ. Allah says, give glad tidings to those who believe and do good deeds, that they will have the garden underneath which rivers flow. كُلَّمَا رُزِقُوا مِنْهَا مِنْ ثَمَرَةٍ رِزْقًا قَالُوا هَذَا الَّذِي رُزِقْنَا مِنْ قَبْلُ. There's different interpretations of this ayah, but one of them is that the people will be given something to eat, and when they have just one bite of it, it'll taste one thing. And when they eat the same thing again, it'll taste completely different. How many people have eaten the same thing over and over and over again and gotten tired of it? Raise your hand. I know I have. Right? You eat so much candy, eventually you get sick. Right? And you get sick of it. But see, in Jannah, that's the point. You don't get sick of these things because they're constantly changing, constantly shifting. The homes that people have in Jannah, well, see, everybody gets $1 million property over there. Right? Everybody is on the same level. It's a egalitarian, it's a equal place for Jannah. Everybody will have a home that is unlike even the greatest home on this earth. You can't compare Bill Gates' house to a house from Jannah. Right? You can't compare the greatest home on this earth to a home in Jannah, because it just can't compare, right? The servants in Jannah, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us, that they are these young men who are servants. And some narrations mention that they'll be glowing white. They'll just be like this luminescent presence. And they'll be there in such a way, and they'll always be there to serve us. And of course, the homes in Jannah, the decorations, right? People have homes here made of bricks, right? Stone. That's what people's homes are made of. Over there, that's not good enough. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, that's not good enough for my servants who have earned my paradise. And so we get homes made of gold, homes with gems and diamonds and rubies and emeralds and pearls all around. Because bricks and stones, that's for this world. Now we get a lot better in the akhirah. Part 6 is the second to last part. For those who joined late, this is obviously, it's maybe a little confusing, but this is, the Journey to Jannah is a class that's essentially story-based. And all these are based on hadith, Quran, and Sunnah. Part 6. Ahmad and his wife walked through the corridors of their home and couldn't believe what they saw. Everywhere they looked, gems sparkled back at them, accenting the gold frames of the doors. The foyer itself had astounded them, with a roof that seemed as if it stretched into infinity. Talk about high ceilings, Ahmed thought. Well, part of him didn't want to open any of the doors for fear of disturbing their beautiful perfection. He decided to open one, and the sights inside astounded him. Lavish decorations and cutlery lined the room with bowls and fruits and other kinds of food he'd never seen before filling up the vessels. The softest and most luxurious looking cushions were neatly organized about, filling up the room for him to lay down and relax wherever he wanted, while the most beautiful bed that he had ever seen sat right in the middle, dozens of pillows resting delicately on the mattress. He stood there for what seemed like forever, just soaking in the scene in front of him, while tears welled in his eyes as he wondered what on earth it was that he had done to ever deserve this. As he turned to close the door, a small dish of fruit caught his eye, and he grabbed one before closing the door, watching in amazement as another fruit appeared in its place. He walked along the length of the hallway, munching on his snack, when suddenly one of the doors opened and his wife snatched his arm, pulling him in. "Look at this," she cried, pointing to the ornately decorated room. "These are all the things that I ever wanted in our house back in our old life. And it's like my favorite interior designer did it all." Ahmed chuckled and opened his mouth to say something when suddenly a voice echoed through their home. "The time has come to meet your Lord, O dwellers of paradise." The two of them looked at each other before sprinting out of the room and towards the door. Their chests buzzed with excitement, and neither wanted to delay that fateful meeting any more than they had to. As they burst out the front door and began to rush through the grass, Ahmed grabbed his wife's hand and smiled at her. This was the fulfillment of everything they had ever worked for, had ever sacrificed for, had ever cried and bled for. And there was no one else he would have rather been there with in that moment. His wife began to laugh uncontrollably as Ahmed said the corniest thing he could think of. "Honey, it's time to meet our Maker." And that's the end of part 6. The homes in Jannah, of course, they don't really have an end, so to speak. Everything that we have in whatever place we are in Jannah will have whatever we desire, whatever our hearts want. And that's what's made clear. And it's hard to imagine because everybody's constantly hearing the same thing. You're going to have whatever you want. You're going to have whatever you want. But the thing is that our imagination in this life is restricted by one thing. And what is that? The constraints. This world has physical constraints. There are physical restrictions in this world to what can be done. So when you can break those chains and do whatever you want to do, have whatever you want to have, it opens the possibilities to anything. Right? And that's what Jannah is about. Whatever we eat, we'll be able to have as much as we want. Whatever we like, we'll be able to have whatever we want. How we like things, they'll be done. And the greatest blessing, the greatest and the pinnacle of a person's existence, of any of our existence, is to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is what will happen. Our companions, they used to ask the Prophet ﷺ that, "Ya Rasulullah, will we see Allah? Are we going to be able to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?" And the Prophet ﷺ's response to them was interesting. He said, "Do you have any trouble seeing the full moon on a clear, cloudless night?" They said, "No." He said, "Just the same, you will see your Lord." Now this is the last part, inshallah, part 7. Ahmed and his wife rushed through the soft grass, their silk garments blowing behind them as they ran. Ahmed had never felt anything more comfortable against his skin and gave thanks that he would never again have to wear an uncomfortable suit to work, or even have to go to work again. The couple slowed as they saw a massive gathering of people, all of them looking up at the sky expectantly. "Ahmed," a voice called out through the throng of people. Ahmed glanced in the direction of the voice and smiled as he saw his old friend Zubayr. As he came closer, Ahmed pulled him into an embrace, and as they pulled back, they couldn't help but just look at each other and smile. "How about it, man?" We made it. All praise to the one who guided us. Ahmed laughed. And we never would have been guided unless he had guided us. Ameen, brother. You said it. Have you been to your home? Mine was the most amazing place ever. I had everything that I ever wanted in my home. And there's a basketball hoop too. You got to come over. You can count on it. I'm going to put up a high score that's going to take you forever to beat. Zubair smiled. I think I've got the time. I'm going to go back to my family, but make sure you come over, okay? I better see you soon. Ahmed sighed happily as Zubair walked away and turned his gaze upward once more. Everything he had seen so far had been nothing short of amazing. But Ahmed knew that the time had come to reach the pinnacle of his happiness. His body shook from anticipation, and he grabbed his wife's hand as they waited along with everyone else, the excitement in the air. He had lived a life pleasing to his Lord, and he had earned paradise. As a booming voice called out to the inhabitants of paradise, Ahmed cried from joy and could only continue to say one thing. Alhamdulillah. And that's the end. In this last part, the statement he says, all praise to Allah, the one who guided us. Alhamdulillah alladhi hadana lihada, wa ma kunna linahtadiya lawla an hadana Allah. This is mentioned in Surah Al-A'raf about what the inhabitants of paradise will say. All praise to Allah. And we would never have been guided if it hadn't been for Allah guiding us. You know, this is really the key at the end of the day when we think about it. Each and every single one of us, when we hear this, this is a reminder of what the future can be for all of us, inshallah. The eternal future can be for all of us. And the thing is that it's hard to comprehend, because even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that it's something that no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind can comprehend. And you can't understand what it means. There's only certain examples that might even make it seem like it makes sense. But the point is that if we're on the path, if we have the ability to know, Alhamdulillah alladhi hadana lihada, Alhamdulillah for the one who guided us, that means we are right there. That means that we are this close. And all we have to do is finish out this tiny, tiny existence in this world. Because I want you to really think about it. 100 years for us in a life, it sounds like a lot, right? Things change in 100 years. But put that on the scale of eternity. Eternity. Now where's 100 years? Can't even see it. We need a microscope that's stronger and greater than any microscope that's ever existed to see 100 years when it comes to eternity. And in Jannah, when we see the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we see our Lord's face, Azza wa Jalla, the greatest thing Allah could ever give us, He will ask us, are you pleased? Are you happy? Think about what that means for us. What did we do to really get that? What did we do to really deserve it? And then Allah says to us, after He blessed us and honored us and favored us, are you happy? Can I give you more? And the response is simple. What more can we get? We have everything. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, from here on out, you will forever have my pleasure, and I will never be angry with you again. That is the greatest success. That is al-fawz al-azim, as Allah calls it, the greatest achievement. And for all of us, when we think about these things, I want to just give some practical points for us, inshallah, to consider, because this can be our story, inshallah. We can be in that place in Jannah. I don't know if that's going to show very well. But number one, always remember that Allah's mercy overpowers His wrath. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself says, لَمَّا قَضَى اللَّهُ الْخَلْقَ, when Allah wrote down the creation, كَتَبَ فِي كِتَابِهِ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ, He wrote something in regards to Himself. He made a rule on Himself. إِنَّ رَحْمَتِي تَغْلِبُ غَضَبِي, my mercy will always overpower my wrath. Remember that above all else. Many scholars begin their hadith collection with this because they try to remind themselves that even if I make a mistake, Allah's mercy will, insha'Allah, be greater than His wrath. Number 2, always still find a way to balance between hope and fear. Balancing between hope and fear is so key. And the narration that's here is, subhanAllah, is a fascinating narration. It's about 2 men who are in the hellfire. Oh, it's just,
yeah,
it's not...
Actually, if you get out of full screen, I think you'll be able to see the whole thing.
Oh, I have that.
Just maybe squeeze it down a little.
I don't know if that's gonna...
That's the opposite way, yeah.
Yeah.
There you
Now
go.
it's better.
There you go.
Yeah, well, I don't have the translation. It's just me telling this. But essentially, these 2 men are in the hellfire. And at some point, they increase their screams of pain and agony. And they begin to scream in a manner that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells these angels, bring them out to me. And the angels bring them, and the people, these 2 men, they stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah says, why did you increase your screams? And they said that, Ya Allah, we had hope that you would have mercy on us. Now there's 2 different reactions. First, Allah says, my mercy for you, inna rahmati alayka, an ta'udu fi makanik. My mercy to you is that you go back to your place in the hellfire. The 2 reactions that come from this. Number 1, the first, what does he do? He runs and jumps back into the hellfire. And the narration says the hellfire becomes cool on him. The second one, he just kind of walks in a manner where he's, like someone who's walking just kind of like looking back. And he's looking back, looking back. And so when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls him back, he says, why didn't you do as your companion did? And the man says, Ya Allah, I had hope that after you took me out of your fire, you took me out of your punishment, that you wouldn't return me to it. And subhanAllah, the response Allah gives, فَلَكَ رِجَاءُكَ فَلَكَ رَجَاءُكَ. For you is your hope. You get what you hope for. I won't put you back in the fire. And Allah puts them both into Jannah. You see, the first man, why did he jump right back into the fire? He said, I spent a life disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So maybe this is my time to actually listen, to do whatever Allah says. The second one, he says that I always knew Allah's mercy. I'm hopeful that He won't put me back. Balancing between hope and fear. This is a key aspect of our deen. Number 3, be willing to work for it. Each and every single one of us firmly believes that you don't get anywhere in life without hard work. There is nobody sitting here who thinks that you get to slack off your whole life and become a millionaire. Nobody thinks that. But why do we imagine that that's the case for our deen? Why do we imagine we can just do whatever we want and then, oh, guess what, red carpet to Jannah? We have to be willing to put in some effort. Right? Put in some time. Blood, sweat, and tears applies to Jannah as much as it applies to our jobs. And that's a key thing. Because the work that we put in, don't think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forget about it. Don't think Allah will forget about the work that we've put in. And that's so important. Allah doesn't forget. وَمَا رَبُّكَ نَسِيًّا. Number 4, build a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In whatever way we can, we should find just a small path to Allah. There may be anybody in this room who feels like they're not worthy. If you weren't worthy, you wouldn't be in this room. I want you to understand that at this very moment right now, there are angels around us. And they are sitting and they're recording everybody's name. And the narration that talks about this says these angels will go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and He'll ask them who was there while He knows who's here. And when they ask, and when they answer Him, they're going to say, this person, Allah says, forgive them all. Forgive each and every single person here. Forgive Suhaib. Forgive Taha. Forgive Rai. Forgive them all. And the angel will say, Ya Allah, but there's that one guy there. That guy Haris is there. And he's not a very good guy. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, forgive him too. Because anyone who keeps that company will be forgiven. They will not be wronged. That's the key. But what's important is to build that relationship. Put the work in. If it means reading just one line of Quran a day, make a habit of reading that one line of Quran, whatever happens in the day. You could have the craziest day, just pull out your phone, read one line, that's it. And I guarantee you, if you build that small chain, if you build that connection, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not forget about it. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُضِيعُ أَجْرَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Allah does not waste the reward of those who do good. Whatever it might be, build a small connection. Number 5, talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In Surah Al-Maryam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that remember Zakaria, when he called out to Allah, nida'an khafiyya, he called out to Allah in a low voice. Ya Allah, I've never been given a child before. Ya Allah, I haven't been blessed with a child, and everybody else in my family has, and I don't think my family is righteous. Ya Allah, please give me a righteous son. And what was the response? It doesn't even say we've accepted, Ya Zakariya, inna nubashiruka bi ghulamin ismuhu Yahya. We gave you a child, we give you glad tidings of a child, Yahya. Sometimes it sounds weird. It's going to feel weird. But I promise you, if we just talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah is not going to ignore us. Right? Allah does not ignore His servants. Number 6, realize your purpose in the world. It is very, very easy. Each and every single one of us likely has to go home and take care of some bills. And it's very easy to think that our purpose in life is paying the mortgage. Our purpose in life is making sure the TV service is still active. Making sure that we're watching the Cowboys. But I promise that's not any of our purpose. The purpose that we have in this life is individual to each and every single one of us. And whatever that might be, we have to do our best to work for the sake of Allah in that path. It could be the strangest thing you can imagine. If you're a computer engineer, your work can become ibadah if you have the intention behind it. And that's it. But realize your purpose, realize you have the opportunity to do it, and do it with ihsan, do it with excellence, and that's worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah. Number 7, surround yourself with good company. I already told you the hadith of good company. But we know the other one as well. The one who has good company is like the one who's friends or who's hanging around a perfume shop. You have good smells on you. The example of the one who has bad company, it's like the person who goes into a blacksmith's office or a blacksmith's place or a construction site. You walk away with dust and soot and all these things on you, right? You don't want that. And that's the point. Good company is like perfume. It beautifies you. It makes you better. And it helps you to grow. Bad company is just as useless as dirt on your clothes. Number 8, forgive yourself. This is very difficult. Because many of us, what we get is this waswasa, this whisper from shaitan. What does he tell us? You're not worthy to be forgiven. You're not good enough to be forgiven. You curse. You do this bad deed. You do that bad deed. You're not worthy for it. And that's us in some ways not being able to forgive ourselves. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ready and willing the moment we ask. The moment we ask, Allah is ready to forgive us. When we are willing to actually take the steps of forgiveness, asking for forgiveness. What we do, we make an intention, I'm never going to do this again. Whether you do it or not doesn't matter. Make the intention, I'm never going to do this again. And you just do your best. And you ask Allah, you have regret. That's it. But be willing to ask for forgiveness. And sometimes that takes forgiving yourself. That takes you being able to say that, you know what, I made a mistake and I'm not going to do it again, inshallah. But I need to ask Allah for forgiveness. I'm worthy of being forgiven. And lastly, remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves us. This is not something that we talk about. Love is a strange concept in our communities, unfortunately. But someone who doesn't love another doesn't call out to us like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does. Ya ayyuhal insan, ma ghurraka bi rabbikal kareem. Oh mankind, what made you ignore your Lord? What distracted you from your honored Lord? What distracted you from the one who loved you before love was a concept? Before love existed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loved His servants. He loved each and every single one of us. And if that wasn't the case, I promise you, you wouldn't be sitting here. I promise you. And this concept, whether we're 70 years old, 60 years old, or 5 years old, that needs to be drilled into our heads. Because it is Allah's mercy and love that will always, as He says, will overpower His wrath. And that's the key at the end of the day. We do our best, we make an intention as best we can to stay away from the bad deeds, but when we inevitably slip up, we ask Allah for His forgiveness, and we know that He's promised that He will forgive us if we're sincere. At the end of the day, that's what it takes to get to Jannah. Is it simple? Yeah. Is it easy? No. But that's the challenge. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to all enter into Jannah. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to be guided to the straight path until our deaths. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide all of our family until the end of times and allow them to enter Jannah with us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us when we fall short. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless our community and help us grow towards Him. Ameen. وصلى اللهم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. آمين يا رب العالمين برحمتك يا رب.